So, I think I've said this before in a video essay that's public, but Eve Edwards is my favorite character on Fire Country. Oh, you thought that because I've spent the last 6 weeks talking about Leone family drama, that it means that I don't love our non-Leone characters just as much. No, let me assure you, I love Eve and Gabriella very much. Even Jake on the odd occasion. Actually, when I created the outline for this project, Eve was supposed to be my second or third character essay, coming after either Bodhi or Riley. It wasn't until much, much later that I decided to create a Leone family block. Indeed, I was still editing the order of these essays when I recorded Bodhi's essay. There were various configurations, and the idea to do a Leone family block came about pretty late. When I thought Fire Country would have 8 episodes in its first half of season 4 and 12 in the second half, I had been planning for 9 essays in the fall and 14 in the spring. I thought that Eve would be a really fun essay for us to come back on the week before Fire Country came back for the spring half of season 4. But with them doing 9 episodes instead of 8, I decided to go ahead and move Eve's essay up. Eve is a character that I think is sometimes forgotten about. I mean, without me telling you, do you know how many episodes of season 1 Eve appears in? It's not 22. Actually, it's 19. She doesn't appear at all in Get Some Be Safe, Happy to Help, or Mama Bear. During Happy to Help, she is recovering from a shoulder dislocation that happened in the previous episode. During Mama Bear, she is off at Instant Command School, but we have no explanation for why she doesn't show up and Get Some Be Safe. Seriously, I went through my notes and all I have written down for Eve is absent. I think these absences for Eve are maybe a part of why people see her as forgettable in season 1. Also, she suffers from the exact same problem in season 1 of Fire Country as Yusuf Kama does in Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore, which is basically that their plotlines were cut from the script. She definitely had a personal storyline in season 1, but that personal storyline got written out, or should I say downgraded, because we know what it was. You can still see artifacts of her original storyline in the very first Fire Country trailer. You see, the first trailer featured things from an earlier script of Fire Country, and I know this because I have read an earlier version of the pilot script. One that seems to be what was actually shot, or not that far off. One of my big guilty pleasures is reading original pilot scripts before they were shot. I've done this for a lot of shows, but the ones that I remember liking the most have been the one for Monk and the one for Fire Country. Somehow, across these 9 essays, I haven't mentioned the original pilot script at all, which is funny because basically everything that I talk about, except for when it comes to Luke and Walter, is quite clear in that pilot script. And the reason I haven't talked about it is, well, it's not canon. It was an early draft. It was rewritten in a major way. There are character name changes. There are character age changes, which frankly I am a fan of. But also because I couldn't find it when I was writing the majority of these essays because I was a big dumb idiot and I didn't download it. I did find it again though, and if you want me to do a video talking about the differences from the original pilot script to the pilot we got, just let me know. I will add that to my summer slate. Normally, I wouldn't even mention something like this, but I've noticed it be said that Eve often doesn't have personal storylines. I think a lot of this is because Eve's personal storyline in the first arc is just so nerfed. I mean, she's flirting with Duck Taco Girl in what must be the most boring queer romance ever to grace network TV. By the time of the second arc, she has nothing personal to do, and all I do is watch those episodes thinking, gee, I bet Eve would be getting married to Maya right about now. Oh, and Maya definitely existed when they shot the pilot. Here's every shot of Maya in the trailer, and here is Gabriella mentioning her in the actual pilot posted on Paramount Plus on YouTube. So take that, ChatGPT. But you know what Eve does have? Eve does have a professional storyline, And as a woman who has had a professional career since I was 21, I think it's fantastic to have a woman where she gets to be ambitious and try to figure out what she wants to do with her career. Everyone seems to forget that she has like 3 or 4 attempts at specific firefighting jobs in season 1. It feels like she is moving through life trying to decide where she wants to be next in the next part of her career, and that's just so very normal. I mean, she is 29 years old. I'm going to be 29 in 2 months, and frankly, had I not scored my current job, I'd still be in that same boat. Both in the pilot and Fresh Prince of Edgewater, Eve's just a regular firefighter, but she stops being a regular firefighter in Where There's Smoke. In this episode, we get to see Eve in charge of training the new cadets, while Jake and Vince go up to save a kid who is stealing marijuana from a marijuana grower. By the next episode, Eve is no longer in charge of training the cadets because Sharon is running things. Instead, she gets to go be Vince's right hand because he's still pissed at Jake. And then she gets to do paramedic skills when Sharon calls her away. She's doing medical stuff again in like old times when she tries to rescue Kirsten, a teenager who fell off a cliff while taking a selfie. But during this rescue, she dislocates her shoulder and has a couple of really hot weeks with Aiden while she recovers, and the rest of the cast does stuff in Happy to Help. Sadly for Eve, though, she and Aiden break up before Bad Guy. Okay, I know I just promised no more bad guy talk, but it is important to point out that Eve is the first one to think that maybe Bodhi won't be okay working the site of an accident of a brother and sister. When Bodhi says he's worried about Vince, Eve immediately transitions to her own concern about Vince. But she defers to Jake right up until the moment Bodhi is literally hanging off of a bridge when she reports Vince for exercising questionable judgment, which, if you've seen my Vince video, you'll know was absolutely the right call. However, this is Vince and Sharon we're talking about, and they certainly don't like it when people say, hey, my chief is having trauma problems, he shouldn't be here. So she gets written up. However, after Erica does her investigation, she not only says that Eve is getting her write-up undone, but she also recommends that Eve climb the ladder at CAL FIRE, and climb the ladder she does. In the very next episode, we see Eve training the 3 Rock inmates on tool safety and maintenance. She has a freak out when Charlie almost dies on her watch, but Manny talks her through it. She's off training at Incident Command School in Mama Bear, but she's back in Two Pink Lines, though really the only thing she does is chat with Jake. By You Know Your Dragon Best, though, that's the episode where you find her using her new instant command skills, and it's actually an episode that has me incredibly pissed off. While Eve is back in Two Pink Lines, she doesn't actually put those skills to use until You Know Your Dragon Best. The episode starts out with her, Jake, and Colin going out to deal with a diabetic emergency. However, because Colin is Colin, he sees an electric vehicle and goes, oh, I should light that on fire. When the crew gets called back out, everyone goes to work firefighting except for Eve. Eve is going to work instant command under Sharon. Throughout the episode, Eve constantly wants to run into danger and Sharon has to pull her back. As the episode progresses, Eve gets more and more frustrated until finally, at the end of the episode, she decides that she is going to take the hose and do the rescue herself. In that moment, she decides she doesn't want incident command to be where her career goes. The reason this pisses me off is, well, you see, I spent the entirety of season 4 going, my god, why are Jake, Manny, and Bodhi fighting over who should be battalion chief when Eve is right there? I think that the right answer for us is right here. Eve knows she doesn't want to be incident command, so she doesn't want to be battalion chief. And frankly, I spent like all of Happy First Day Manny screaming at my TV because of this. Here's Manny running into the fire with a hose to fight it, aka the exact reason why Eve is not battalion chief, even though by all metrics it should have been her to be the one appointed by Brett. I mean, if you need more proof, in The Tiny Ways We Start to Heal, it ends with Eve bringing everyone together to celebrate Vince's birthday. And in Like a Wounded Wildebeest, Brett says that what Station 42 really needs is family healing. And so what does Manny do on his first day? While he does initially say that he's going to heal the station, he spends the entire day picking fights with Sharon, even though this is the first day that someone else is wearing her husband's title of battalion chief. Also, because this is really bothering me, Folgers, which is implied to be the brand of coffee that Vince makes at Station 42, has a Colombian blend. Here it is in my local Walmart pickup. But no, Manny hears, make the station your own, and somehow thinks, change coffee on the first day. But enough Eve and Manny comparisons in Season 4. Let's get to the origin of the Eve and Manny comparisons, and those are from Affair to Remember. In this episode, Eve is shadowing Manny as he leads Three Rock. It's the day of the winter fair, and frankly, Eve's behavior disappoints me since neither she nor Manny do anything to protect Bodhi from being verbally harassed by the people he grew up with. Aside from my personal qualms about the episode, Manny is super pissed to have Eve following him everywhere, at one point saying to her, "Are you my shadow or my replacement?" However, by the end of the episode, Manny realizes that it's actually a lot to lead these 15 to 20 men who are all implied to have some level of anger or emotional problems, while also, trying to be a fire captain. So he tells Vince that actually, yes, he would like the help that Eve can provide at Three Rock. Exactly how good a job Eve does, though, is in question, since, Rebecca wanders away from the group, gets drunk because Bodhi dumped her, and then Bodhi has to cover for her. Normal Bodhi and Rebecca stuff. Speaking of Rebecca, we see Manny using Eve's help in the very next episode. Since he is still trying to pay off all of his gambling debt, he takes the day off to work a second job and leaves Eve in charge. She decides that the inmates are going to go plant trees for the day because apparently some of the homeowners were bigoted against fire camps, and Eve thinks that service solves bigotry. However, as I repeatedly say, Rebecca's no idiot and knows that this is not how bigotry gets fixed. But since Eve is the boss and able to give Rebecca a write-up, Rebecca works while complaining to Bodhi and just generally having her normal attitude. Everything goes fine until a tree falls on Eve and she gets trapped. Even though he's only been an inmate firefighter for probably 6 months, Bodhi ends up being instant command of this rescue, while Sharon does incident management from her hospital bed. Bodhi manages to rescue Eve, but somewhere in the process, Rebecca ends up getting hit by the tree that had been pinning Eve down, and she dies. As a result, Eve feels immense pressure and grief because she feels like she was in charge. Rebecca's death is her fault. No, she doesn't talk to Bodhi about it. I don't know why. It had looked like Eve had finally found her professional calling with the inmate firefighters, but by the end of My Kind of Leader, she's the one trying to save an inmate from a dangerous situation, and it won't be long until she goes off drinking to cope. You see, she decides that if beer is good enough to help Vince cope, it's good enough for her. So this part of her arc shows Eve as a 29-year-old woman is doing what 29-year-old women do. She is looking for the next step in her career and trying to figure out what she thinks that looks like. She tries being a paramedic, it doesn't stick. She tries being incident commander, she lasts all of a couple of hours. And now here she is thinking she can lead inmates at Three Rock, and on her very first day, an inmate dies. And not only an inmate, but another woman, which triggered her PTSD in regards to Riley. Yes, I know they say complex PTSD, and I'll get around to that when I go over those episodes. But this is her arc. It might not be flashy, but it's something that feels very grounded in reality, particularly to me, a 28-year-old woman who has finally found her niche after 7 years of searching for the right answer. But you see, just like Bodhi's essay and with my future essays on Gabs, Jake, and Manny, I don't just want to show you their arcs, because sure, their arc is important, but I want you to understand how the character functions. Because, just like with Bodhi, without understanding the character dynamics, you can't really understand how the events of the Drugs at Camp arc is a continuation of their arcs, and so you can't understand what happens in that final scene of the finale. My best friend once said that he thought they could write Eve out and half the audience wouldn't notice. Don't mind him though, he enjoys TV, and Eve is just, a very normal character to exist on TV. I mean, don't get me wrong, Eve's childhood best friend died on her birthday, and now Eve is trying to be the replacement daughter to her best friend's parents. That is definitely not normal. But, compared to Bodhi, to Luke, to Vince, she's about as normal as they come. While I love to hate on Aiden for being about as interesting as wet cardboard, their love story is really sweet if I pretend like it wasn't just a giant step down from Eve's love story with Maya. In the pilot, Eve very clearly has a crush and is awkward about it. She tries to ask Aiden out in Fresh Prince and gets rejected. However, things seem to be doing well, and by work don't worry, when she has wedding hors d'oeuvres to be discarded, she calls Eve to take them. Eve and Aiden get a little non-awkward flirting time, and then a sky bridge falls on Aiden. Well, you might expect that Eve spends the whole episode looking for Aiden. What actually happens is that Eve gets pulled away to do work, and in the end, she and Aiden are reunited, as she is revealed to be one of the 15 trapped people under the sky bridge. At the end of the episode, Aiden says she has a crush on Eve, and they kiss and become an item. When Eve dislocates her shoulder 2 episodes later, Aiden takes care of her, and they seem to be living together for a few weeks, but Aiden realizes that she isn't ready to move on yet from her marriage, and they break up. We get a brief mention of her and Bad Guy, and then she's gone. So it is a very short relationship arc. 6 episodes. Okay, technically 8 if you count it not being over until the beginning of Bad Guy. And I'm not saying it isn't kind of lackluster. Instead, I'm saying that this is just a very normal, very sweet relationship, even if it is devastatingly short. And it's just one example of Eve's broader normalness in a space where nobody else is normal. I mean, contrast her with Jake. While Eve is hurt by Bodhi's actions both the night Riley died and in the pilot, she is quick to call Jake out when she thinks Jake is going to get Bodhi sent back to prison. In like old times, while Jake is obsessing over Bodhi allegedly trying to steal Gabriella from him, Eve is just showing off the food Aiden made her last night. While Jake is dodgy about his kidney match status, Eve says, with a mouthful of food, that she isn't a match for Sharon. And it's not just Jake. It's Manny too. While Manny is ranting about how Charlie ain't losing his leg on his watch and get your hopes up, Eve is trying to find a way to save him. While Manny avoids any responsibility for Rebecca's death like the plague in My Kind of Leader, Eve struggles with guilt and asks Vince for time off, which he promptly denies, telling her that the right thing to do is to keep working and make Rebecca's death count for something. Later in the same episode, Eve expresses worry to Vince that she might need to go to therapy, but Eve rebuts this. Not because she thinks therapy is a waste of time, but because Vince doesn't go to therapy, and if Vince doesn't go, then how useful could it really be? But we are gonna see what that mentality does for Eve and for Vince when I start going over the drugs at camp arc. Over and over again, we see this big contrast, and you've seen it especially in these last 6 essays. The 5 members of the Leone family, especially our core 4 with Bodhi, Vince, Sharon, and Luke, are all about maladaptive coping strategies. People who look like they've got it all together, but really they're just a hot mess because of trauma. Eve gives us a chance to look at what normal looks like when a very normal person goes through very traumatizing events, like having an inmate die under their authority. It's really fun too because Eve's desire to make Rebecca's life and death mean something is really a key part of what drives our story in Season 1 to its full conclusion. When I started this video essay series, I started at the end. I showed you the evidence for my thesis before I even stated my thesis. And with this being the last video in the first half of the video essay series, I thought it was prudent to end at the beginning. You see, Eve isn't just my favorite character on Fire Country. She's also incredibly special to me. Not just because I'm a lesbian, but because I love that Eve gets to be both mothering and wear non-femme fatale pantsuits, but also because of what she represents for this project as a whole. I previously shared with you that I started this project by arguing with ChatGPT about something, but I hadn't told you what it was. I think part of it was that it was this revolutionary idea that was so insane that I didn't think anyone else would agree with where I was coming from. But now, 10 essays later, I've laid out for you Vince having PTSD and Luke being the family caregiver. I feel comfortable enough sharing this crazy idea with you. The question that I asked ChatGPT, the one for which I intended to disprove the answer, was who are Bodhi's safe people? While writing this essay, I opened ChatGPT up in incognito mode to answer this question, and it did not go well. So instead, I went to Gemini to ask the same question. I often use ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot as my little trio of basically writer's assistants. They check me on my logic, but not my facts. Although I will say Copilot especially loves to check my use of things like the Duluth Power and Control Wheel and the DSM criteria for PTSD. So when I put this question into ChatGPT, who are Bodhi safe people, the answer that Gemini gave me was pretty similar to the one that I got from ChatGPT back in July. Manny, Freddie, Gabs, Audrey, Sharon, and Vince. Though I think ChatGPT put Eve on that list and Gemini did not. To me, with all of my logic from the show and my mental archive of the episodes, even before I had watched season 1 and done meticulous cataloging, I knew that nobody on that list was a safe person except for Audrey, but ChatGPT actually had to convince me about the Audrey part. It was Eve. It was always Eve. She is Bodhi's safe person. And then while I was writing this outro, I asked ChatGPT to set aside that memory and go ahead and answer the question again. Based on everything that we've discussed, based on all 70 of the saved memories from Fire Country, who do you think are Bodhi's safe people? And ChatGPT has given me the same answer based on all of the work that we've done. Bodhi's safe people are Eve and Audrey. You're probably wondering why I didn't put this at the beginning of the essay, and the answer to that is that I've been trying to be a lot more aware about misogynoir, especially since Taylor Swift released Life of a Showgirl, and even more so since Google Docs kept trying to autocorrect the word as I wrote it in the script. I think it's prudent that we not erase Black women or minimize their role in media to where they can only support white men. You see, the real beauty of Eve isn't that she sees Bodhi, it's that she sees everyone. In season 2, she is the only one to call out Manny's behavior at the campaign fire as self-punishment. In the next episode, she picks up that Gabriella's hesitation about the wedding venue is actually hesitation about her impending marriage. In season 3, she realizes that Jake's chaotic behavior is an attempt to get Vince's attention. She's also the only one in the entire show to just say Vince doesn't have a prickly personality, Vince needs therapy. And she says it right to his face, but in a way that doesn't damage his self-concept. I think it's very funny in a cynical way, and actually I'm going to be talking about that in the Drugs at Camp Arc essays. The only person she hasn't seen fully is Sharon, and I think that's coming. Actually, the amount that Eve hasn't seen Sharon in season 4 is incredibly surprising to me. In the tiny ways we start to heal, Sharon is clearing out Vince's things on Vince's birthday. Eve just takes the bags to the donation center and Vince's favorite jacket ends up being bought. At the end of the episode, she calls Walter, Vince's abuser, to ask for a recipe for Sunday sauce, even though Luke canonically knows how to make Sunday sauce. And in Like a Wounded Wildebeest, she decides to tell Jake about Ruby's threatening note because apparently Jake is still the expert on Vince's mental state and what they should do for the family, even though this is a skill he hasn't shown off ever. But Eve is becoming a foster mom this season, or I should say, Eve is going to become the girlfriend of a foster mom this season. In addition, just like season 3 largely felt like the dad season, season 4 feels like it's going to be the mom season. I'm very hopeful for the idea that we're going to get more info about how it is that Eve, the seer of everyone, just doesn't see Sharon that well. Honestly, I am desperately hoping that it involves Eve's own mom because we haven't met her yet. And we are only 12 days away from Christmas. As of the time the video goes live, I promised you in my Sharon essay that I would have a finalized plans ready to go in my Sharon and Luke video. However, with some help from ChatGPT, Milkfur, and Horser, I figured out the schedule. On New Year's Day, I'm going to have the Sharon and Luke joint essay. Then I'm going to be slowing down to posting every 2 weeks so I can get some stuff done. On January 10th, I'm going to have a fun video essay about warrior cats. On January 24th, I'm going to be finally posting my Vince queer coding essay. It feels like this essay idea has literally existed in my brain since July. On February 7th, I'm going to be doing a video that my friends voted on, which is talking about the music in Fire Country. And then on February 21st, I'm going to be back in action with weekly videos, starting with my essay on Gabriella.